My phone vibrated on the lab table, the screen flashing a name I knew too well. William Hayes, my father, CEO of Hayes Pharmaceuticals. The man I once admired, the man I once believed would always stand by my side. But that was in the past, when I was a child. Now, things were different. My father had a new wife and her child, a half-sibling I never asked for. I took a deep breath, trying to suppress the unease rising in my chest. I already knew what was coming. I answered the call. "Taylor, I finalized the paperwork to transfer your patent rights to Emily." His voice came through the phone, calm as if he were merely announcing today's weather. A simple statement, yet it carried the weight of 5 years of relentless research. An invention that could revolutionize the treatment of meningococcal disease. An invention I had poured my youth into, sacrificing sleepless nights and enduring countless failures to perfect. I gripped the phone tightly. "What did you just say?" I asked, my voice steady but tinged with anger. "I've made my decision, Taylor. Emily has the business and management skills you lack. She will know how to commercialize the company's innovations better than you. Handing over the patent is what's best for the company. It will help it grow, and you'll benefit as well." Emily Hayes, my stepsister. 27 years old, fresh out of an MBA program from a university no one had heard of. A woman who had never stepped foot in a laboratory, who had never understood the complexities of scientific research, yet was favored by my father over anyone else. Hayes Pharmaceuticals may have partially funded my research, but this patent did not belong to them. And my father had no right to transfer it to that girl. "You can't do this. The patent isn't yours," I said, keeping my voice as calm as possible. "Of course it is," he scoffed. "Everything you've done while working at this company belongs to Hayes Pharmaceuticals, and as CEO, I have full authority over where this invention goes." I stared at the screen in front of me. An email from the U.S. Patent and Trademark Office was still open. 3 months ago I had officially filed for the patent under my name. He didn't know I had anticipated this. He didn't know I had been preparing for this moment all along. "Wish Emily luck with something she knows nothing about," I said coldly. A moment of silence on the other end. Clearly, my father hadn't expected my composure. Perhaps he thought I would beg, get angry, or try to persuade him. But I did none of those things. "So be it," he said after a pause, a hint of hesitation in his voice. "The lawyers will send over the transfer documents for you to sign." "Fine," I replied before hanging up. As soon as the call ended, I sent a message to Jessica Porter, my lawyer. He did exactly what we predicted. I wasn't nervous, out of fear. I was excited. I had seen this coming, and I had prepared for it. I set my phone down, but the anger inside me still burned. I knew my father would do this. 5 years of research, all my sweat and sleepless nights, and now he intended to hand it over to someone else, as if I had never existed. But to understand why I saw this move coming, we need to go back 2 years, to when everything started to change. Before my father remarried, Hayes Pharmaceuticals was everything to me. It wasn't just a pharmaceutical corporation, it was my mother's legacy. Evelyn Carter Hayes, a brilliant scientist, had co-founded the company with my father when it was nothing more than a small lab with a dream to change the medical world. She was the heart of the company, the one who laid the foundation for groundbreaking research in neurological treatments. When she passed away from the very disease she had dedicated her life to curing, I swore to continue her work. I threw myself into research, working tirelessly to build upon what she had started. And I believed my father shared the same vision. But then he met Victoria Reed, his second wife. Victoria entered our lives with a gentle smile and a sweet voice, but I quickly realized she was not as simple as she appeared. She brought her daughter Emily Reed, who immediately became the center of my father's world. At first I tried to form a relationship with Emily, but I quickly realized she had no interest in science or research. She didn't care about chemical formulas, had no understanding of biological mechanisms, and had zero grasp of the complexities of the pharmaceutical industry. The only thing she cared about were influence and control. And my father handed them to her. I remember that fateful night, when my father stood in the middle of the company's annual gala, holding a glass of red wine and proudly announcing, "I'm thrilled to announce that Emily will be taking on the role of Chief Strategy Officer at Hayes Pharmaceuticals. She will bring a fresh perspective, drive new business strategies, and modernize our company." I looked around, expecting a reaction from the scientists in the room, but most remained silent. They all knew Emily lacked experience, but no one dared to challenge my father, the CEO. I stood up and objected. "She hasn't worked a single day in this company," I said, struggling to keep my voice steady. But my father simply shook his head. "Taylor, you're a brilliant scientist, but you've never understood the market. Emily has the education and business vision you lack." That was the moment I understood everything had changed. From that day on, my presence in the company began to shrink. Funding for my research was cut. Projects I had led were handed over to Emily despite her lack of expertise. My access to the company's labs became restricted under flimsy excuses: security concerns, department restructuring, system improvements. Gradually, I realized that Emily and my father didn't want me there anymore. And the biggest realization came from the way Emily carried herself, as if she was already the true leader of Hayes Pharmaceuticals. She attended research meetings, taking notes diligently, asking questions that only someone clueless about science would ask. "Why can't we simplify this drug synthesis process? If it takes too long, we'll lose profits. Can we make an app to help customers track the drug's effects in real time?" She wanted to turn a scientific breakthrough into a cheap, fast-tracked commercial product, something she thought could be streamlined without understanding how it actually worked. I couldn't let that happen. Not to my research, not to my mother's legacy. I couldn't let Emily, someone who had no understanding of what we did, destroy the most important work of my life. I reached out to Jessica, an old friend from college who had since become one of the top intellectual property lawyers. When I told her about my situation, she wasn't surprised. "Taylor, this happens in the pharmaceutical industry more than you think. But if you want to retain ownership of your research, we have to act now." Jessica helped me build a plan. First, I began collecting evidence. Every email denying me funding, every internal document showing changes to my access, every message from Emily about how she wanted to learn more about my work, and my data, later rebranded under her name. Each piece could become part of the legal case against them. But the most important thing was the patent. Jessica advised me to file for the patent independently, ensuring that the critical breakthroughs in my research were not owned by Hayes Pharmaceuticals. For months, I meticulously reviewed every document, removing anything the company could claim as their property. I even conducted my final experiments in a private lab, outside of the company, to avoid any ties. And then, 3 months ago, the USPTO officially granted me the patent under my personal name. No one in the company knew. I had kept it a secret, waiting for the day they filed their own patent application on my invention, so I could sue them in return. That day was today. I opened a drawer and pulled out a thick folder labeled, "The Evelyn Carter Hayes Project," the codename I had given to my plan to protect my research, named after my mother, to honor her legacy and dedication. I sent another message to Jessica. "Let's begin." She replied immediately. "The lawsuit paperwork is ready, now we just wait for their next move." I knew my father wouldn't give up easily. He would try to pressure me into signing the transfer documents, use his power to push me out of the company, threaten me, maybe even play dirty. But this time I was ahead of him. The next morning, a message from Jessica Porter arrived just as I opened my eyes. They filed the patent application, and as we predicted, the USPTO immediately rejected it. I smiled. Everything was going according to plan. My father thought he could steal my work without consequences. A few minutes later, my phone vibrated again, an unknown number. I picked up. "Taylor Hayes?" "Yes. This is Thomas Greer from the U.S. Patent and Trademark Office. We need you to come in to clarify an issue regarding your patent. Hayes Pharmaceuticals has submitted an application, but it was rejected due to a legal conflict with your existing patent, We need to determine who rightfully owns this invention. I'll be there, I replied calmly. Hayes Pharmaceuticals Law Office, 10 a.m. The large conference room overlooked the city skyline. My father sat at the head of the table, Emily beside him, along with a team of lawyers. I walked in, holding a folder of evidence. Next to me was Jessica, completely composed and in control. No one spoke for the first few seconds. My father was the first to break the silence. "You've caused a lot of trouble, Taylor," he said, irritation in his voice. I sat down, meeting his gaze directly. "Trouble you brought on yourself," I replied, placing my documents on the table. "The USPTO has rejected Hayes Pharmaceuticals' application, and now we have an investigation into who truly owns this invention." Emily scoffed, crossing her arms. "This is ridiculous. The company funded your research. That means it belongs to Hayes Pharmaceuticals." Jessica leaned forward, her tone calm but sharp. "Not quite. Let me clarify a few things." She slid a thick folder across the table to their legal team. "As you can see, Taylor filed for the patent 3 months ago under her own name. During the application process, we provided evidence showing that the most critical breakthrough, the drug delivery system, was developed outside the company's funding scope. In other words, Hayes Pharmaceuticals has no claim to this invention." One of my father's lawyers flipped through the pages, his expression shifting immediately. "She's right," someone murmured to my father. I continued. "Moreover, I have extensive emails, messages, and internal reports proving that over the past 2 years, the company deliberately pushed me out of the projects I led. If you want to take this to court, I'm ready. And I'm sure the USPTO would be very interested in learning how this company tried to steal my intellectual property." Silence filled the room. My father clenched his jaw. Finally he exhaled, trying to maintain his composure. "We can negotiate. What do you want?" I leaned back in my chair, a cold smile forming. "I want nothing from Hayes Pharmaceuticals. I've started my own company. I'm only here to make sure that neither you nor Emily ever get your hands on my research again." Emily shot up from her seat, furious. "You can't do this. I spent months preparing the commercialization strategy for your work. I talked to investors, worked with the marketing team. You can't just ruin all of that." Jessica remained unfazed. "You really think an online MBA and a few LinkedIn posts qualify you to lead a scientific project?" Emily's face turned red. "I understand business better than Taylor." I crossed my arms, resting them on the table, raising an eyebrow. "Oh, really? If you understand it so well, then explain how my drug delivery system works. Can you describe the breakdown and absorption mechanism of the drug molecules in the meningeal cells?" Emily opened her mouth, but no words came out. Her confusion was obvious. The room fell silent again. My father's lawyers started avoiding eye contact with Emily. Jessica smirked. "Or did you just memorize some phrases from the report you didn't actually understand?" Emily clenched her fists but had no comeback. My father closed his eyes, as if he finally realized he had lost. At last he spoke, his voice hoarse. "We'll withdraw the application. But don't think this is over, Taylor." I stood up, gathering my documents. "No, you're mistaken. It ends here." Then I turned and walked out, leaving my father and Emily to face the consequences of their own actions. 2 days after my meeting with my father and Emily, the news exploded across the media. "Hayes Pharmaceuticals under investigation for patent fraud." The Wall Street Journal's front-page headline. "Investors concerned over intellectual property scandal at major pharmaceutical firm." Financial Times. "A family business or a blatant takeover? Scientist betrayed by his own father." Forbes. In just 48 hours, everything changed. Hayes Pharmaceuticals stock plummeted by 20% on the first trading day after the scandal broke. A wave of shareholders dumped their stocks, wiping billions off the company's market value. Investment funds began pulling out, wary of the reputational damage and looming legal battles. I stood by the window of my temporary office, a small space in a biotech research hub in San Francisco, sipping coffee while reading the latest news on my screen. Beside me, Jessica Porter set down her phone, a satisfied smile on her face. The judge has granted an emergency injunction. Hayes Pharmaceuticals can no longer claim any ownership over your research. I leaned back in my chair, feeling a weight lift from my chest. So they have no way out of this now? Not just that, Jessica added, flipping open her laptop. The U.S. Patent and Trademark Office has launched a formal investigation into the company for knowingly filing an invalid duplicate patent application. If they're found guilty, the consequences will be severe. I nodded. My father thought he could manipulate the system, thought he could discard me like any other employee forced out of a company. But this time, he and Emily had underestimated me. That afternoon I received a call from a Bloomberg reporter. Dr. Taylor Hayes, can you confirm that you have left Hayes Pharmaceuticals and started your own company? I didn't hesitate. Yes, I have founded Hayes Biotech. The moment those words left my mouth, I felt it. Freedom. For years I had been trapped under my father's control, manipulated and undervalued. But now I had my own company, where I would dictate my own future. No one could take that away from me. The next day, my name was on every major headline. Dr. Taylor Hayes leaves family company, launches Hayes Biotech to continue breakthrough research. Young scientist defeats his own father's corporation in intellectual property battle. I received hundreds of emails, not just from investors but from scientists, former colleagues, people who had worked under me and had also been stifled by Hayes Pharmaceuticals' corporate politics. Taylor, if you're hiring, I want in. We believe in your research, let us help you bring it to the world. For the first time in years, I felt happy, and for the first time, I wasn't alone. 3 days later I received a message from my father. Taylor, we need to talk. I didn't respond right away. This time he no longer had any control over me. I turned to Jessica. What's our next step? She smiled and placed a contract on the table. Now, we secure funding, Hayes Biotech needs capital to expand, and the good news is, many people are eager to invest. I picked up the document, scanning the list of potential investors. From major venture capital firms to private benefactors, everyone wanted a piece of this project. Leaning back in my chair, I let a small smile form. My own career had begun. A fresh start for a brighter future. I sat in my office at Hayes Biotech, a steaming cup of coffee in hand, eyes fixed on my computer screen as news headlines flashed before me. Hayes Pharmaceuticals scandal. CEO William Hayes speaks out amid intellectual property theft allegations. Taylor Hayes, the young scientist who took down his own father's company. The truth behind the patent dispute. Is Hayes Pharmaceuticals hiding something? The media was on my side. No matter how hard my father tried to control the narrative, the public had little sympathy for a pharmaceutical giant accused of stealing research from its CEO's own son. My phone buzzed. Jessica Porter. You should turn on the finance channel right now. Frowning, I grabbed the remote and switched on the TV mounted on the wall. A live interview was airing. Emily Hayes sat across from the host, her face carefully made up, but tension was evident in her posture. Miss Emily, your company has been accused of attempting to claim ownership of a patent that legally does not belong to you. Can you explain this? Emily took a deep breath and forced a smile. This is just a misunderstanding. We invested significantly in this research, and we believe. Then can you explain the mechanics of the drug delivery system that Hayes Pharmaceuticals claims to have developed? The host interrupted. I leaned back in my chair waiting for this moment. Emily opened her mouth, then hesitated. She glanced off camera, probably hoping for someone to prompt her. But no one could save her now. Well, essentially it's a method that helps the drug work more efficiently in the body. The host raised an eyebrow. Can you be more specific? For example, how does the drug molecule identify Meninges cells without affecting healthy ones? Emily faltered, gripping the arms of her chair. Well, I'm not a scientist, but our team has worked very hard. But 2 weeks ago you stood in front of the press and claimed to be leading this research. If that's the case, surely you can explain at least the basic principles. Her face turned red. I think this question is better suited for our technical experts. The host smirked. That's interesting. Because according to leaked internal reports, the entire research team has actually left the company to join Hayes Biotech. Are you certain your company even has any technical experts left? The screen cut to Emily, struggling to form a coherent response. And failing miserably. Social media erupted. OMG, she doesn't even understand the research she tried to steal. Wow, this is the future CEO? Who still trusts Hayes Pharmaceuticals at this point? I took another sip of coffee, savoring the moment of their downfall. 3 days later, the investigation into Hayes Pharmaceuticals deepened. Leaked documents revealed that the company had fast-tracked clinical trials for several drugs, disregarding safety concerns. Some trial data had been manipulated to make the drugs appear more effective than they actually were. This was no longer just a patent dispute. It had become an ethical crisis. The company's stock continued to plummet. Regulatory agencies began stepping in. The FDA, U.S. Food and Drug Administration, launched a formal investigation. I received an email from an internal source within the company. Taylor, I think you should see this. The attached file contained internal reports proving that Hayes Pharmaceuticals had concealed severe side effects of a new meningococcal cancer treatment drug. A knot tightened in my stomach. Not only had they tried to steal my research, but they were willing to push an unsafe drug to market just to maintain their stock value. This isn't just about intellectual property anymore, this could be a major case of medical fraud. The company had exposed Emily, newly appointed, to take the fall for the greed that had been there all along. 1 year after I left Hayes Pharmaceuticals, my world had completely changed. Hayes Biotech was no longer just a small lab in a San Francisco research hub. We had expanded, attracting top scientists, many of whom had left Hayes Pharmaceuticals in the wake of last year's scandal. Investors continued pouring funds into the company, believing that if there was any place that truly prioritized ethics and science, it was Hayes Biotech. And not just that. After months of clinical trials, my research on targeted drug delivery had yielded astonishing results. Human trials showed a treatment effectiveness 10 times greater than previous methods, with significantly reduced side effects. My name appeared in leading scientific journals, at major research conferences. I was invited to speak at the International Biotechnology Conference, where I presented my breakthrough to hundreds of medical professionals. People who could use this research to save millions of lives. I had done it. I had continued my mother's legacy. One late afternoon, as I was reviewing lab reports, my office door creaked open. I looked up. Emily. She no longer had the polished appearance she once flaunted. No designer dresses, no expensive jewelry. Just a girl in a plain white blouse and jeans, clutching a chemistry textbook. Can I come in? I nodded, gesturing to the chair across from me. She sat down, staring at the desk, hesitant. I applied for an undergraduate chemistry program at Stanford, she said quietly, but with certainty. I raised an eyebrow but wasn't surprised. I had already heard that she had decided to start over. This time, on the real path of science. Why? I asked, my tone steady. Emily took a deep breath. Because I don't want to pretend anymore. I don't want to spend my life talking about things I don't understand. She looked up at me. I know I did a lot of things wrong. But I want to make it right. I was silent for a moment before nodding. That's a good decision. Emily smiled faintly, something between sadness and hope. This time, I'm going to stand on my own. She stood up and walked out of the office without asking for forgiveness. I understood, this was a journey she had to take on her own. 3 days later, an uninvited visitor appeared at my office door. I glanced through the glass and recognized William Hayes, my father. He looked nothing like the man I had last seen. Older, thinner, and missing the pride that had once defined him. I hesitated for a few seconds, then pressed the button to unlock the door. My father stepped inside, standing silently for a moment before speaking. You did it. His voice was slightly hoarse. I looked at him, waiting for him to continue. Your mother would have been proud. A small pang hit my chest. the name he rarely mentioned. My mother. I didn't respond. I've lost everything, he continued. My career, my reputation, my company. But perhaps the only thing I truly regret losing is you. I clenched my fists slightly but kept my voice steady. Did you come here for my forgiveness? He looked at me, exhaustion evident in his eyes. No, I don't expect that. I just wanted to say, I was wrong. A long silence stretched between us. I took a deep breath, then slowly replied. If you really mean that, then live as someone Mom would be proud of. He stood there for a moment, then quietly turned and walked away. I had done it. And I had changed more than just my own fate. That night, as I was tidying up my desk, a small package was delivered. Sender, Dr. Evelyn Carter Hayes. My heart tightened. How was this possible? I opened the box. Inside was an old notebook. My mother's notebook, something I hadn't seen in years. I flipped through the first few pages, feeling as if she were still here. On the very first page, in her familiar handwriting, was a message. No one can extinguish your light or dictate your dreams. You are capable of more than you know. I traced my fingers over the words, warmth spreading through my chest. I looked out the window, where the city lights burned brightly against the night sky. I had fought, I had reclaimed what was mine. And most importantly, I had become someone my mother would be proud of. The story of Taylor Hayes is not just a legal battle over intellectual property. It is a journey of self-discovery, breaking free from family manipulation and taking control of one's future. It reflects a harsh reality in the industry, greed, favoritism and power struggles that can stifle true science. But more than anything, it proves that justice and perseverance can prevail. Like Taylor, sometimes, to protect what truly belongs to us, we must have the courage to stand up, fight back and carve our own path. What do you think of Taylor Hayes' story? If you were in this situation, would you choose to fight or concede? Share your thoughts in the comments. And don't forget to follow the channel for more gripping stories about family, ambition, and valuable life lessons.